Sweden has become the 32nd member of the NATO military alliance. Just like its neighbour Finland, it's joined in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. NATO is bracing for a long period of extreme tensions with Russia, and Sweden could prove to be crucial, partly because of a Swedish island in the Baltic Sea that you've probably never heard of, that would be seen as vital to defending the Baltic States if Vladimir Putin ever decided to attack them. Sweden's Foreign Minister is here in Berlin, and we spoke to him about where all of this could be headed. Tobias Billström, thanks for joining Deutsche Welle. Now, Sweden is joining NATO just at a time when the alliance is preparing for the threat of a possible conflict with Russia at some point in the coming years. How real is that threat in your view?
First of all, Sweden wants peace and NATO wants peace. It is not Sweden and NATO that constitutes the problem. It is Russia that is the problem. It is Russia that is behaving irresponsibly and recklessly and threatening the world with the nuclear arms and behaving in a way which is unacceptable. So I would like to put it this way. We have to understand that we are in for a prolonged period of conflict with Russia. That goes for NATO, it goes for EU, and we have to adapt ourselves accordingly.
You said in your speech here in Berlin today that you are concerned about the possibility that Russia will try to test NATO. For instance, one example people talk about a lot is in the Baltic States. Explain your concern there.
Well, first of all, we have to return to Ukraine to understand this, because Ukraine is now in a situation where it's under attack by Russia and has been so for 2 years. Supporting Ukraine in every possible way, militarily, financially and politically, is of utmost concern. Because if Russia were to win in Ukraine, that would definitely increase the appetite. Russia is on a path towards regaining its former imperial assets. Among them the Baltic States, Poland, etc. But first and foremost we are talking about Ukraine, which is Putin's first goal.
Yeah, so let's talk about Ukraine in a moment. But if we look at a scenario involving the Baltic States where Putin was perhaps trying to test NATO there, Sweden could be absolutely central to that potential conflict, partly because of the island of Gotland in the Baltic Sea. Could you just explain why is Gotland so important?
Well, more importantly, I would like to start by us joining NATO, because Sweden and Finland now becoming members of NATO and being members of NATO has added significantly to the stability and the security in this part of the world. With us joining NATO, all countries who have a coastal area around the Baltic Sea, bar Russia, will be NATO members. And that will mean, of course, higher degree of security for both the high north, for the North Atlantic and for the Baltic Sea, which are now being tied together. So Gotland, of course, is an important island in this, but Gotland is part of a greater discussion about the security in the area, and that has now been increased significantly with us joining NATO.
And specifically on Gotland, so Gotland has strategic value there. Could you just describe the value there and also tell me what preparations can we now expect that Sweden's in NATO to make Gotland safer?
Well, first of all, again, Gotland is of course important, and it's a part of my country's territory. But Gotland now also forms part of NATO's territory, and that means that we are now going to invest in the forward land presence which NATO has in Latvia. Sweden is going to deploy part of a mechanized battalion in Latvia. That has been said already before we became NATO members. We are already part of the air policing, and we are also going to bring our significant and substantial naval forces to the table, which is also going to add to the security around Gotland and in the Baltic Sea. Sweden being one of the very few countries who actually have submarines in the Baltic Sea.
Now, Gotland has had fewer than 400 or so troops in recent years on it. What's the trajectory there? What can people expect? Is this going to become an island then with thousands of troops present?
We are ramping up our presence, but again, this is also part of the NATO membership. And we're going to work together with other partners to now hammer out the regional plans and the strategic concepts. And in this, of course, Gotland and the Baltic Sea area and Sweden and other countries will form part. That work is underway. Sweden is going to participate in all the committees which are dealing with this within the NATO, and we shall see, of course, what the ultimate solutions will be. We won't like to see any regionalization, though. That's not really appreciated in NATO, and Sweden doesn't believe in that. It is up to Secure, the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, the head of NATO's military forces, to ultimately present what he thinks are the best solutions for this.
Now, we've talked about Ukraine already. Let's return to that. So it, of course, is still fighting Russia, and it urgently needs help. There's been a lot of talk about Sweden providing the Saab Gripen fighter jet to Ukraine, but there's been no announcement yet. When can we expect an announcement?
Well, the short answer is that the Armed Forces of Sweden has presented a report, and that is now being analysed within the government offices. When that analysis is ready, we are ready to give an answer, but that is not the moment in time right now.
I mean, it is frustrating for the Ukrainians often to see these processes taking place. We all remember what happened with tanks and the deliberations here in Germany, the deliberations within the United States about fighter jets. Why weren't these deliberations made last year? What's the delay?
Well, Sweden has joined the F-16 coalition, which was launched last year. And the F-16 coalition will, through the deployment and the ability to provide Ukraine with fighter jets, add substantially to the air defense forces of Ukraine. That work is now underway with several countries adding to this, and Sweden is part of the F-16 coalition, although we don't have F-16, but we have other capabilities.
So on the Gripen, can we expect something in weeks, months, this year?
I'm not really in a position to give you an exact date. What I can say is, of course, that the Armed Forces of Sweden's report is important for us, and that needs to be deliberated on within the government offices before we are ready to give a final answer.
Now let's look at Sweden's overall support. I mean, it's been very vocal, and you were vocal in your speech here today, and you described Sweden as being among the most prominent donors to Ukraine. But if we compare Sweden's contribution to its Nordic neighbours, then in terms of being a percentage of GDP, according to figures from the Kyiv Institute here in Germany, Sweden comes in fourth place. That we have Denmark on top place, 2.4% of GDP so far, Norway in second place with 1.7%, Finland in third with 0.7%, Sweden far behind on 0.5%. Now that puts it on a level with Germany, but wouldn't you prefer to be, I mean, you happy with fourth place in the Nordic states?
Well, first of all, I've been confronted with this argument before, and the problem with the Kyiv Institute's report is that it doesn't take into account all the packages that has been decided but not yet delivered, and that has to add to the mathematics, and that would bring us up much higher than the position you gave. Also, on top of this, I would like to say that the things we have given, most notably the CV-90s armored vehicles, have been praised by the Ukrainian governments. When President Zelensky visited Sweden in August, he said, "Thank you very much for these vehicles, which saves Ukrainian lives because they are of such good quality." So we are doing a lot. We are prepared to do more. Now we are also joining the Czech initiative for procuring ammunition also outside of the European Union. And we are ready to do more. This is a long-term engagement for the Swedish government, and we're going to ramp up the support that we give to Ukraine. The important thing, however, is now that both we and the EU has to move out of giving packages. We have to find a formula for achieving long-term support to Ukraine, both financially and militarily.
I mean, there's a lot of this kind of comparison and competition going on between countries at the moment. It's pretty hot between Germany and France. Emmanuel Macron has talked about, potentially sending troops into Ukraine at some point. You said today that you don't see that as an option for Sweden. Do you think that's a bad idea for any NATO member state, or is it just Sweden that you don't see that as a possibility?
Well, first and foremost, I speak, of course, for Sweden, but I think that at this point in time, we have to listen to what the Ukrainian needs and what the Ukrainians asks for. And that has to be done in conjunction and collaboration with the Ukrainian government. And what they are asking for is, of course, the training missions where Sweden have participated in. The Interflex in the UK is a very prominent example of this, where we have trained almost a brigade to the betterment of the Ukrainian armed forces. So we should do more, of course, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily have to do it on Ukrainian soil. We can achieve a lot outside of Ukraine as well.
Just a very quick question. We're wrapping up now, but there's a lot of pessimism about Ukraine right now, that it can win, that it can achieve its goal, which is to take back all of its territory. Are you confident that it can still achieve that?
Yes, I am. And as a matter of fact, I don't feel any fatigue at all, and neither do my country. Sweden actually has the highest figures in favor of supporting Ukraine. We stand at 90%, which is the highest in the European Union. And the reason why we're doing this is because we see that there is a great risk that the appetite of Russia is going to only be increased if it wins in Ukraine. And that's going to threaten the Baltic States, Finland, Poland, and ultimately also ourselves. We have to see this war for what it is. It is a war between a country which doesn't feel any limits, which wants to regain its former imperial past, and that has to be stopped. We don't do that anymore. We do things differently nowadays. And the European Union has to come to terms with this and brace itself for a prolonged conflict with Russia and do what is necessary, increasing production of military means to support Ukraine and see to it that Ukraine actually wins its territorial sovereignty back and also puts a stop to Russia once and for all.
Tobias Billström, thank you very much.
Thank you.